The autumn of 1974 hangs heavy over Washington, D.C., like a shroud of broken promises and shattered trust. The nation's capital still reeks of the Watergate scandal's sulfurous aftermath, where the very foundations of American democracy were shaken by the revelations of corruption at the highest levels of government. In this atmosphere of paranoia and political opportunism, ambitious men and women circle the wounded body of American politics like vultures, waiting to feast on the carrion of collapsed careers and abandoned principles. Senator Malcolm Duncan's black Lincoln Continental glides through the fog-shrouded streets of Georgetown, its headlights cutting through the October mist that rises from the Potomac River like the ghosts of political scandals past. The car's leather interior, still redolent with the aroma of expensive cigars and whispered conspiracies, carries one of the few remaining untouchable figures in American politics. Duncan, at 62, represents the old guard of principled leadership, a silver-haired statesman whose integrity survived even the most vicious attacks from opposition research teams and investigative journalists. The Washington Monument pierces the gray morning sky like an accusatory finger, its marble surface reflecting the pale light of a sun struggling to penetrate the cloud cover that seems permanently settled over the District of Columbia. Around the National Mall, the great institutions of American democracy stand like ancient temples, their neoclassical columns and marble facades hiding the Machiavellian machinations that pulse through their corridors like blood through arteries. Congressman Michael Macbeth emerges from the Russell Senate Office Building, his breath visible in small puffs of vapor that dissipate quickly in the crisp autumn air. At 38, he possesses the lean, hungry look of a man who has tasted power but not yet consumed his fill. His perfectly tailored navy suit, purchased with campaign contributions and justified as a necessary expense for maintaining his public image, fits him like armor prepared for battle. His dark hair, styled in the fashionable longer cut that younger politicians have adopted to appeal to the changing demographics of American voters, frames a face that has learned to project sincerity even when plotting betrayal. The Capitol building looms before them, its cast-iron dome crowned with the Statue of Freedom, a 19-foot bronze figure that has witnessed over a century of American political theater. The building's sandstone walls, weathered by decades of Washington's humid summers and bitter winters, have absorbed the echoes of countless speeches, debates, and behind-closed-doors negotiations that shaped the destiny of a nation. Inside the Capitol's marble corridors, the atmosphere crackles with the electricity of impending political warfare. Staffers in polyester suits and wide ties hurry past carrying manila folders thick with opposition research, their faces bearing the expression of foot soldiers in an army, where information serves as ammunition and reputation provides the only armor against career-ending scandals. The click of high heels on marble floors creates a staccato rhythm as female aides and lobbyists navigate the male-dominated hierarchy with a combination of intelligence, ambition, and carefully calculated charm. Macbeth's office in the Rayburn House Office Building reflects his current status in the political food chain. Respectable but not yet powerful. Influential but not yet indispensable. The American flag stands in one corner, its red, white, and blue fabric hanging motionless in the climate-controlled air that circulates through the building's ventilation system. Framed photographs line his desk, handshakes with labor union leaders, ribbon-cutting ceremonies for infrastructure projects in his district, and carefully staged family portraits that project the image of stable, middle-class values that resonate with voters who still believe in the American dream. Banquo arrives precisely at 9 o'clock. His punctuality reflecting the military discipline he learned during 2 tours of duty in Vietnam before trading his army uniform for a congressman's suit. His wire-rimmed glasses and slightly graying temples give him the appearance of an academic, but his eyes hold the steady gaze of a man who has seen combat and understands that politics, like war, requires both strategy and the willingness to make difficult sacrifices. His friendship with Macbeth stretches back to their days as young staffers, when they shared cramped apartments in Arlington and dreams of someday wielding the kind of influence that shapes national policy. The Appropriations Committee meeting is in 20 minutes, Banquo reminds him, consulting a leather-bound appointment book filled with the careful penmanship of a man who trusts handwritten notes more than the new electronic systems that younger politicians have begun adopting. Duncan wants to discuss the infrastructure bill. The infrastructure legislation represents more than just federal spending on roads, bridges, and public transportation. It's a political weapon that can be used to reward loyal districts and punish rebellious ones. Every mile of highway funding, every bridge repair contract, every mass transit improvement carries with it the potential to strengthen political alliances or destroy careers. In the post-Watergate era, where public trust in government has been shattered like glass on concrete, politicians who can deliver tangible benefits to their constituents hold a significant advantage over those who traffic only in rhetoric and empty promises. The Hart Senate office building's corridors echo with the measured footsteps of political pilgrims making their way to the morning's most crucial meeting. Fluorescent lights cast their sterile glow across polished linoleum floors that reflect the hurried movements of staffers carrying briefcases stuffed with polling data, demographic analyses, and voter registration statistics. The walls display portraits of senators past and present, their painted eyes seeming to follow the procession of modern politicians who navigate the same treacherous waters of public service and private ambition. Macbeth and Banquo enter the elevator together, sharing the confined space with two women whose presence immediately commands attention. The elder of the pair, Senator Patricia Weir, possesses the sharp-eyed intensity of a veteran political operative who has survived 3 decades in Washington's shark-infested waters. Her silver hair is styled in the fashionable bob that professional women have adopted as a symbol of their refusal to be dismissed or marginalized. Her navy suit, tailored to project authority without sacrificing femininity, bears the subtle pins and insignia that mark her as a member of the Senate's inner circle. Beside her stands Congresswoman Helen Cawdor, a rising star whose youth and charisma have already made her a favorite of television news producers and magazine photographers. At 32, she represents the new generation of politicians who understand that image and message matter as much as policy and substance. In an era where television has transformed political communication from intimate conversation into mass entertainment. Her auburn hair catches the elevator's harsh lighting, and her green eyes hold the calculating intelligence of someone who has learned to navigate Washington's maze of competing interests and hidden agendas. Gentlemen, Senator Weir greets them with a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes, ready for today's battlefield. The elevator's brass buttons gleam under the fluorescent lights as they ascend through floors packed with the machinery of American democracy. Committee rooms where legislation is crafted and careers are made or broken. Reception areas where lobbyists wait with patient smiles and expensive briefcases. And private offices, where the real business of government is conducted away from the cameras and microphones that have made every public statement a potential weapon in the hands of political enemies. The Appropriations Committee meeting room represents the epicenter of federal power, where the nation's purse strings are controlled and the priorities of American society are translated into concrete budgetary allocations. The mahogany conference table, polished to mirror brightness, stretches like a landing strip down the center of the room, surrounded by leather chairs that have supported the weight of senators and congressmen who collectively control trillions of dollars in federal spending. Duncan enters the room with the quiet authority of a man who has spent 4 decades earning the respect of colleagues on both sides of the aisle. His silver hair is perfectly groomed, and his charcoal suit bears the subtle elegance that comes from shopping at Washington's most exclusive tailors. Unlike the younger politicians who surround him, Duncan moves without the nervous energy of ambition. He has already achieved everything most men dream of, and his remaining years in public service are motivated by genuine desire to leave the country better than he found it. Maps of congressional districts cover one wall, their boundaries drawn and redrawn by the complex mathematics of gerrymandering and the simpler arithmetic of racial demographics and economic statistics. Each colored section represents thousands of voters whose daily lives will be affected by the decisions made in this room. Highway construction projects that will create jobs in rural counties, urban renewal programs that will reshape inner cities, and educational funding that will determine whether children in struggling school districts have access to the resources they need to compete in an increasingly complex economy. The morning light filters through tall windows that offer a view of the Capitol grounds, where tourists from across America gather daily to take photographs and tour the building where their representatives supposedly work on their behalf. The reality, visible from this privileged vantage point, is more complicated. A system where access is determined by campaign contributions and political influence, rather than the simple democratic ideal of one person, 1 vote. Macbeth takes his assigned seat, his fingers unconsciously drumming against the leather portfolio that contains his talking points for the infrastructure discussion. The legislation under consideration represents more than just federal spending. It's a political chess game where every move must be calculated for its impact on future elections, coalition building, and the delicate balance of regional interests that keeps the Democratic Party from fragmenting into competing factions. Staff members file into the room carrying bound copies of the proposed legislation, documents thick enough to serve as doorstops and complex enough to hide provisions that will benefit special interests whose names never appear in the public debates. The political consultants who helped craft the language sit along the walls, their expensive suits and confident expressions marking them as the modern equivalent of court advisors whose counsel shapes the decisions of elected officials. Television cameras wait in the hallway, their operators ready to capture the carefully staged moments of bipartisan cooperation or dramatic confrontation that will fill the evening news broadcasts. In an era where political theater has become indistinguishable from actual governance, every meeting is performance art, and every statement is crafted for maximum impact on public opinion polls that have become the primary measure of political success. As the committee meeting concludes with the usual handshakes and carefully worded statements for the press, 3 figures emerge from the shadows of a side corridor, like apparitions materializing from the political ether. They are the city's most notorious political consultants, a triumvirate of strategic masterminds whose whispered advice has toppled senators and elevated unknowns to positions of extraordinary influence. The first consultant, Dr. Margaret Hex, possesses the unsettling ability to predict electoral outcomes with mathematical precision. Her computer analysis, fed by punch cards and magnetic tapes that whir through the basement offices of the Democratic National Committee, has correctly forecasted every major political shift since the 1968 convention riots in Chicago. Her gray hair is pulled back severely, and her thick-rimmed glasses reflect the fluorescent lights like the eyes of some calculating machine designed to decode the mysteries of voter behavior. Beside her stands Thomas Word, a pollster whose telephone surveys penetrate the American psyche like surgical instruments, extracting the fears, hopes, and prejudices that determine how citizens mark their ballots in the privacy of voting booths across the nation. His rumpled brown suit and coffee-stained tie give him the appearance of an absent-minded professor, but his questions can expose the hidden racism, economic anxieties, and social resentments that successful politicians learn to exploit without ever acknowledging their manipulation. The third member of their sinister trinity, Sarah Gray Malkin, specializes in opposition research, the dark art of excavating embarrassing details from political opponents' pasts and transforming private failures into public scandals. Her network of private investigators, former journalists, and disgruntled staffers can uncover everything from college drinking incidents to extramarital affairs, creating detailed psychological profiles that reveal the pressure points where ambitious careers can be destroyed with surgical precision. Congressman Macbeth, Dr. Hex calls out, her voice carrying the authority of someone whose predictions have become legendary throughout Washington's corridors of power. We have been studying the demographic shifts in your district, and the data suggests interesting possibilities for your political future. The trio approaches through the marble hallway where portraits of former congressional leaders gaze down with expressions of stern disapproval, as if sensing the corruption that flows through the building's ventilation system like an invisible toxin. Their footsteps echo against the high ceilings, creating a rhythm that seems almost ritualistic in its measured precision. Our computer models indicate a 73% probability that you will be offered Duncan's Senate seat when he announces his retirement next month. Wired adds, consulting a manila folder thick with statistical analyses and voter preference charts. The party leadership needs someone who can maintain his coalition while appealing to younger demographics. Macbeth stops walking, his leather briefcase suddenly feeling heavier as the implications of their predictions sink into his consciousness like acid eating through metal. Duncan's Senate seat represents more than just political advancement. It's entrance into the inner sanctum of American power, where legislation is crafted that affects millions of lives, and where individual senators can shape the direction of national policy through committee assignments and strategic alliances. Furthermore, Graymalkin continues with the cold precision of a surgeon describing a particularly delicate operation. Our research suggests that Duncan is considering an announcement for the presidential nomination in 1976. His departure from the Senate would create opportunities for those positioned to capitalize on the resulting power vacuum. The Washington Monument is visible through the tall windows at the corridor's end. Its marble obelisk, pointing toward gray clouds that seem permanently settled over the District of Columbia, like a canopy of political cynicism. The building around them pulses with the activities of American democracy, staffers rushing between meetings, with briefcases full of legislative proposals, lobbyists waiting in reception areas with patient smiles and unlimited expense accounts, and journalists prowling the halls like predators searching for the scent of scandal or the promise of exclusive information. The infrastructure bill you just discussed, Dr. Hex explains, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, will pass with bipartisan support, generating positive publicity for everyone associated with its success. But the real prize lies in positioning yourself for Duncan's inevitable ascension to higher office. The consultant's words hang in the marble-lined corridor, like incense burned at some unholy altar, their prophecy creating possibilities that Macbeth had never dared imagine. The path from ambitious congressman to senator to presidential candidate suddenly seems not just possible but inevitable, as if the complex machinery of American politics was already aligning to elevate him through the hierarchy of power. Behind them, the committee room empties as senators and representatives disperse to their afternoon appointments, fundraising lunches with wealthy donors, press conferences designed to generate favorable coverage, and private meetings, where the real business of government is conducted away from the cameras and recording devices that have made every public statement a potential weapon in the hands of political enemies. Duncan emerges from the committee room, his silver hair catching the afternoon light that filters through the building's tall windows. His presence commands immediate attention from the handful of staffers and journalists who linger in the corridor, their faces turning toward him like flowers following the sun's path across the sky. "Michael," Duncan calls out, his voice carrying the warm authority that has made him beloved by colleagues and constituents alike. "Walk with me. We need to discuss your role in the upcoming campaign season." The three consultants melt back into the shadows as quickly as they appeared, leaving only the echo of their prophecy hanging in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. Macbeth feels their words burning in his mind as he falls into step beside the man who has become both mentor and, perhaps, obstacle to his newfound ambitions. The November rain pounds against the windows of Macbeth's Georgetown townhouse like the judgment of an angry god, each droplet carrying the weight of political prophecy and personal ambition. The three-story brick colonial, purchased with careful campaign contributions and justified through the labyrinthine accounting methods that allow politicians to live beyond their official salaries, sits on a tree-lined street where Washington's power elite retreat from the public scrutiny that follows them through their daylight hours. Inside, the warm glow of brass table lamps illuminates rooms decorated in the sophisticated style that political wives learn to cultivate as extensions of their husbands' public images. Persian rugs cover hardwood floors that creak with the weight of history and conspiracy. Oil paintings of Revolutionary War scenes hang on walls painted in deep burgundy and forest green, colors chosen to suggest both patriotism and prosperity to the journalists, donors, and fellow politicians who attend the carefully orchestrated dinner parties that serve as Washington's primary method of conducting serious business. Lady Macbeth moves through the living room with the predatory grace of a woman who has spent 15 years mastering the deadly art of political marriage. At 35, she possesses the sharp beauty of a Renaissance dagger wrapped in silk, her auburn hair styled in the feathered perfection that successful political wives have adopted as their uniform. Her emerald cocktail dress, purchased at one of the exclusive boutiques on Connecticut Avenue, fits her like armor designed for social warfare rather than physical combat. She has been watching the evening news coverage of her husband's committee performance, studying the camera angles and sound bites with the analytical intensity of a military strategist examining battlefield intelligence. The television screen flickers with images of Duncan's press conference, where his silver hair and grandfatherly smile command the respect and affection that Macbeth hungers to inherit. "The consultants were right," she murmurs to herself, her voice carrying the sultry authority of a woman who has learned to wield influence through carefully calibrated charm and ruthlessly applied intelligence. Duncan's announcement is coming sooner than expected. The telephone rings with the insistent urgency that characterizes all communication in the nation's capital, where information travels at the speed of ambition and yesterday's secrets become tomorrow's headlines. She answers with the polished professionalism that political wives perfect, like concert pianists mastering difficult pieces, her voice modulating automatically into the warm tones that suggest accessibility while maintaining distance. Macbeth residents, this is Eleanor speaking. The caller is one of her contacts from the Washington Post's newsroom, a society reporter whose column can make or break political careers through its coverage of the dinner parties, charity galas, and private gatherings where the real business of government is conducted. The reporter's voice carries the excitement of someone who has stumbled upon information that could reshape the political landscape. Eleanor, darling, you need to know that Duncan is meeting with party leadership tomorrow morning. The rumor mill suggests he's preparing to announce his presidential exploratory committee. Eleanor's grip tightens on the telephone receiver as the implications cascade through her mind like dominoes falling in predetermined patterns. Duncan's presidential campaign would create a vacuum in the Senate seat, but it would also generate national attention that could elevate whoever serves as his successor to positions of extraordinary influence. The timing is perfect for someone positioned to benefit from the resulting power shift. Through the living room windows, she can see the lights of other Georgetown townhouses where similar conversations are taking place, where ambitious couples are calculating odds and measuring opportunities with the precision of commodities traders analyzing market fluctuations. The neighborhood serves as a residential extension of Capitol Hill, where proximity to power creates its own form of currency, and where dinner invitations can be more valuable than campaign contributions. Macbeth arrives home at precisely 8:30. His timing so consistent that neighbors could set their watches by his appearances. His wool overcoat drips November rain onto the Persian rug in the foyer, and his leather briefcase bears the weight of classified documents and confidential memoranda that represent the raw material of political ambition. His face carries the exhaustion of a man who has spent 12 hours navigating the treacherous currents of congressional politics. The infrastructure bill passed committee, he announces, hanging his coat in the hallway closet where it joins the collection of expensive suits and formal wear that serve as costumes in the ongoing theater of American democracy. Duncan was masterful in his presentation. Eleanor approaches him with the fluid movements of a dancer who has choreographed every gesture for maximum impact. Her perfume carries the subtle scent of jasmine and ambition, a fragrance she selected specifically for its ability to linger in memory long after she has left a room. Her hands reach up to straighten his tie, an intimate gesture that serves multiple purposes: wife caring for husband, political partner assessing appearance, and strategist preparing her most important asset for the battles ahead. Duncan called while you were in traffic. She lies with the smooth confidence of someone who has learned that truth is merely one tool among many in the arsenal of political success. He wants to discuss something important tomorrow morning, something about his future plans. The rain continues its relentless assault against the windows, creating rivulets that run down the glass like tears shed for the innocence that Washington systematically strips away from everyone who seeks to wield power in its marble corridors. Outside, the streetlights cast pools of yellow illumination that reveal other political couples arriving home from their own daily battles, their faces bearing the same mixture of exhaustion and anticipation that characterizes all who serve in the gladiatorial arena of American democracy. The crystal decanter filled with Kentucky bourbon catches the lamplight like liquid amber, casting prismatic reflections across the mahogany coffee table where the evening's political intelligence has been spread like a war room briefing. Eleanor pours 2 glasses with the measured precision of a chemist preparing volatile compounds, the alcohol serving as both social lubricant and liquid courage for the conversation that will determine their political destiny. Michael, darling, she begins, settling into the leather armchair that faces her husband across their private sanctuary. We need to discuss the opportunities that Duncan's announcement will create. The living room around them represents 15 years of careful social climbing. First edition books that demonstrate intellectual sophistication, crystal stemware that suggests refined taste, and photographs with influential politicians that serve as visual resumes for visitors who matter. The Persian rug beneath their feet cost more than most Americans earn in a month, purchased with funds from a political action committee, that exists solely to enhance their lifestyle while maintaining the fiction of middle-class relatability. Macbeth loosens his silk tie, the Windsor knot unraveling like his carefully constructed moral certitudes. The bourbon burns as it slides down his throat, but not as much as the ambition that has been growing in his chest since the morning's prophetic encounter with the political consultants. His reflection in the window shows a man caught between what he has been and what he might become, the glass serving as a mirror that reveals both his current limitations and his unlimited potential. The consultants mentioned something about positioning myself for Duncan's seat. He admits, his voice carrying the weight of confession, but surely the party leadership has already identified their preferred successor. Eleanor's laugh carries the sharp edge of someone who has spent years studying the chess game of Washington politics, while her husband focused on the immediate moves required for survival in the House of Representatives. She rises from her chair with the fluid grace of a predator who has spotted vulnerable prey, moving to the window where the rain continues its relentless percussion against the glass. Leadership follows strength, not sentiment, she explains, her reflection joining his in the dark mirror of the window. Duncan's announcement will create chaos in the party hierarchy. Senators will jockey for committee chairmanships, representatives will position themselves for leadership roles, and the smart money will flow toward whoever demonstrates the vision and ruthlessness necessary to fill the vacuum. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimes 9 times, its brass pendulum measuring the passage of moments that carry them closer to decisions that cannot be undone. The sound echoes through rooms decorated with the artifacts of American political history, framed copies of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, oil paintings of founding fathers whose moral clarity seems to mock the compromises that modern politics demands from its practitioners. But Duncan trusts me, Macbeth protests, the bourbon making him more honest than strategic wisdom would recommend. He's been my mentor, my political father, the man who taught me everything I know about navigating this system. Eleanor's eyes narrow with the focused intensity of a surgeon preparing to remove a malignant tumor. She has spent years watching her husband's career plateau at the level of competent mediocrity, observing more ruthless politicians advance past him through their willingness to sacrifice personal relationships for political advancement. The time for sentiment has passed. Only action can secure the future that their ambitions demand. Mentors become obstacles when their protégés outgrow their guidance, she states with clinical precision. Duncan represents the old guard, the generation that still believes politics can be conducted according to gentlemen's rules. But Watergate changed everything. The public expects corruption now. They've lost faith in institutional integrity. She moves to the mahogany desk, where manila folders contain the fruits of her own investigative efforts. For months, she has been cultivating relationships with investigative journalists, former staffers, and political operatives whose loyalty can be purchased with the right combination of information and financial incentives. The network she has constructed operates in the shadows of Washington's power structure, gathering intelligence that can destroy careers or elevate unknowns to positions of extraordinary influence. I've been reviewing Duncan's financial records, she continues, opening a folder that contains photocopied bank statements, tax returns, and investment portfolios acquired through methods that would horrify citizens who still believe in privacy rights. His real estate investments in Virginia show interesting patterns. Properties purchased through shell corporations, development projects that received federal funding, zoning changes that coincidentally benefited his holdings. The documents spread across the desk like evidence in a criminal proceeding, each page representing years of careful accumulation of wealth that exists in the gray areas between legal investment and illegal influence peddling. The paper trail reveals the complex financial architecture that successful politicians construct to transform public service into private prosperity while maintaining the fiction of modest government salaries. Macbeth approaches the desk with the reluctant steps of a man walking toward his own execution, his fingers trembling slightly as he examines the evidence that could destroy his mentor's career and clear the path for his own advancement. The numbers on the pages blur together as the bourbon and moral conflict create a psychological fog that obscures the distinction between right and wrong. This information, properly presented to the Washington Post's investigative team, would generate front-page coverage for weeks, Eleanor explains, her voice carrying the cold satisfaction of a chess master announcing checkmate. Duncan's presidential ambitions would evaporate overnight, and his Senate seat would become available for someone with the vision to claim it. The rain against the windows intensifies, as if the weather itself is responding to the moral storm brewing in their Georgetown sanctuary. The digital clock on the nightstand glows 2:47 a.m. in red numerals that pierce the darkness of their bedroom like accusatory eyes. Macbeth lies motionless beneath Egyptian cotton sheets, his body paralyzed by the weight of the decision that awaits him when dawn breaks over the District of Columbia. Beside him, Eleanor breathes with the steady rhythm of someone whose conscience has never been burdened by moral complexity, her auburn hair fanned across the pillow like spilled wine. The telephone sits on the mahogany nightstand like a loaded weapon, its receiver positioned precisely where Eleanor placed it before retiring. The Washington Post's investigative desk operates around the clock, staffed by journalists whose hunger for career-defining scoops makes them available at any hour for sources willing to provide information that can topple political giants. All Macbeth needs to do is dial the number she has memorized and speak the words that will destroy Duncan's reputation forever. Thunder rolls across the Potomac River, its rumbling voice seeming to echo the turmoil in Macbeth's chest. The storm that began as November rain has intensified into something more violent, with lightning illuminating the Georgetown streets in stark flashes that transform familiar neighborhoods into alien landscapes. Through their bedroom windows, he can see other townhouses where Washington's power elite sleep peacefully, unaware that their world is about to be reshaped by the betrayal brewing in this elegant sanctuary. Eleanor stirs beside him, her hand reaching across the mattress to find his arm. Even in sleep, she maintains the tactical awareness of a general who never truly relaxes her vigilance. Her fingers trace patterns on his skin that spell out the names of Senate committees, presidential campaign organizations, and federal agencies that could be placed under their control if they demonstrate the ruthlessness necessary to seize power when opportunity presents itself. "Michael," she whispers, her voice carrying the hypnotic quality that has guided his career choices for 15 years of marriage. The morning edition deadline is in 3 hours. The grandfather clock downstairs begins its slow procession toward 3 o'clock, each chime echoing through the house like a funeral bell tolling for Duncan's political career. The sound mingles with the rain against their windows and the distant rumble of early morning traffic as Washington prepares for another day of legislative combat and bureaucratic warfare. Macbeth rises from the bed, with movements that feel disconnected from his conscious will, his feet finding the Persian rug that covers the hardwood floors. His silk pajamas, monogrammed with his initials in gold thread, hang loose on his frame as if his body is already diminishing in preparation for the moral compromise that will hollow out his soul. The reflection in their bedroom mirror shows a man caught between what he was and what he is about to become. The manila folder lies open on Eleanor's dressing table, its contents spread across the antique surface like tarot cards predicting Duncan's doom. Bank records showing suspicious transfers, real estate documents revealing hidden ownership, and correspondence that demonstrates the complex web of financial relationships that successful politicians weave around themselves like protective cocoons. The evidence is damning not because it reveals criminal behavior, but because it exposes the gap between public rhetoric and private reality that destroys political careers more effectively than any federal prosecution. "He trusted me," Macbeth says to his reflection, his voice barely audible above the storm's crescendo. "Duncan brought me into his inner circle, taught me everything about legislative strategy, treated me like the son he never had." Eleanor appears behind him in the mirror, her reflection joining his in the silvered glass that has witnessed countless moments of political calculation and personal betrayal. Her hands rest on his shoulders with the weight of inevitability, her touch conveying both comfort and command. She has spent months preparing for this moment, cultivating sources and gathering intelligence while her husband focused on the daily mechanics of congressional survival. "Sentiment is a luxury we can no longer afford," she replies, her breath warm against his ear. "Duncan represents the past, but you embody the future. The party needs leaders who understand that modern politics requires surgical precision, not genteel compromise." The telephone's presence dominates the room like an altar waiting for sacrifice. The number for the Post's investigative team burns in Macbeth's memory, 7 digits that will transform him from dutiful protege to political assassin. The journalists who answer that phone have built careers on destroying public figures, their Pulitzer Prize ambitions fed by sources willing to provide the ammunition necessary for character assassination. Lightning illuminates their bedroom in stark white flashes, the thunder following seconds later with the voice of heaven's disapproval. But the storm also provides cover, its violence offering a natural explanation for any observer who might notice unusual activity in the Macbeth residence during the pre-dawn hours when decent people sleep peacefully in their beds. Eleanor hands him the telephone receiver, its black plastic warm from her grip. The weight of the device seems disproportionate to its size, as if it contains the compressed mass of all the moral choices that have led them to this moment of ultimate betrayal. The dial tone buzzes with electronic patience, waiting for him to compose the number that will end Duncan's career and launch his own ascension to power. His fingers find the rotary dial, each number clicking into place with mechanical certainty. The first digit, 2. The second, 0. The third, 2. Each movement brings him closer to the point of no return, the moment when his transformation from loyal lieutenant to ruthless usurper becomes irreversible. The phone rings once in the Post newsroom, then twice. On the third ring, a voice answers with the weary professionalism of someone accustomed to receiving calls from sources whose information can reshape the political landscape overnight. Investigative desk. This is Henderson. The Washington Post newsroom buzzes with the electric energy of a major political scandal breaking like a dam burst across the front pages of America's newspapers. Fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across desks cluttered with coffee cups, overflowing ashtrays, and typewriter ribbons that have been worked to exhaustion by journalists, racing to meet deadlines that could reshape the political landscape. The massive printing presses in the basement rumble like earthquake tremors, producing thousands of copies that will carry Duncan's disgrace to doorsteps across the nation. 3 weeks have passed since Macbeth's midnight phone call, and the resulting investigation has consumed Washington like a political wildfire. The headline, "Senator Duncan's Hidden Millions," spreads across the Post's front page in bold type that screams betrayal and corruption. Beneath it, a photograph shows Duncan leaving his Senate office with the haunted expression of a man watching his life's work crumble into ash and memory. The Hart Senate office building stands like a mausoleum in the December cold, its marble corridors echoing with the whispered conversations of staffers, lobbyists, and journalists who gather in small groups to dissect the scandal's implications. Christmas decorations hang from the ceiling like cheerful lies, their red and green splendor contrasting grotesquely with the gray atmosphere of political death that permeates every corner of the building. Macbeth emerges from the elevator onto the 6th floor, where Duncan's former office is being systematically dismantled by moving crews who handle each box of documents like archaeological artifacts from a lost civilization. The mahogany furniture that once symbolized senatorial dignity now appears tainted by association with financial impropriety. Campaign photographs and awards for public service are wrapped in newspaper like evidence from a crime scene. The irony cuts through Macbeth's chest like a blade forged from his own ambition. He has achieved everything he dreamed of: appointment to Duncan's Senate seat, assignment to crucial committees, and recognition as a rising star in the Democratic Party's leadership hierarchy. Yet victory tastes like ashes in his mouth, seasoned with the bitter flavor of betrayal and the metallic aftertaste of moral compromise. Banquo waits in the reception area, his face bearing the expression of a man who has witnessed something that challenged his fundamental beliefs about friendship and loyalty. His wire-rimmed glasses reflect the harsh fluorescent lighting as he studies his longtime friend with the analytical intensity of a scientist, examining a specimen that has undergone an unexpected mutation. The party leadership wants to fast-track your confirmation. Banquo reports, his voice carrying a professional distance that had never existed in their previous conversations. Governor Harrison will make the appointment official tomorrow morning. The walls of the reception area display portraits of previous senators whose faces seem to judge the current occupant with expressions of stern disapproval. These painted eyes have witnessed decades of political drama, but the speed and completeness of Duncan's fall represents something unprecedented in the building's history. A man who commanded universal respect has been transformed overnight into a cautionary tale about the hidden corruption that festers beneath Washington's marble facade. Through the tall windows, the Capitol dome is visible against gray December skies that seem permanently overcast since the scandal broke. Television news trucks line the streets like modern siege engines, their satellite dishes reaching skyward like electronic prayers for more revelations to feed the public's insatiable hunger for political destruction. Reporters with microphones patrol the sidewalks like hunters searching for wounded prey. Duncan's Presidential Exploratory Committee disbanded yesterday. Banquo continues, consulting notes written in his careful handwriting. 3 major donors have already committed to alternative candidates. The efficiency of Duncan's political execution would be impressive if it weren't so morally horrifying. Within 72 hours of the Post's first article, campaign contributors withdrew their support, speaking engagements were canceled, and longtime allies began issuing carefully worded statements that created distance between themselves and the scandal. The machinery of American politics operates with the remorseless precision of an industrial assembly line, discarding damaged components and replacing them with functional alternatives. Macbeth's new office, located 3 doors down from Duncan's former sanctuary, represents the physical manifestation of his ascension to power. The mahogany desk, leather chairs, and oil paintings of American historical figures create an atmosphere of gravitas and authority. Yet the space feels contaminated by the knowledge of how it was acquired, as if the walls themselves have absorbed the moral toxins that made his promotion possible. Secret Service agents patrol the corridors with the heightened vigilance that accompanies major political scandals. Their dark suits and earpieces mark them as representatives of a security apparatus that has learned to treat every politician as a potential threat to national stability. The post-Watergate era has transformed government buildings into fortresses, where paranoia masquerades as necessary caution. There's something else, Banquo adds, his voice dropping to the whisper that Washington insiders use when discussing information too dangerous for normal conversation. 3 different journalists have called my office asking about our friendship, our business relationships, our campaign finance connections. The implication hangs in the air between them like poison gas slowly filling a sealed chamber. If investigative reporters are examining Macbeth's inner circle, then his ascension to power has painted targets on the backs of everyone associated with him. In the post-scandal environment, proximity to power has become synonymous with potential corruption, and former allies can become liabilities that must be eliminated for the sake of political survival. The Kennedy Center's grand foyer glitters with the artificial brilliance of Washington's social elite gathered for the annual Democratic Party fundraising gala. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors, where senators, congressmen, and Supreme Court justices mingle with defense contractors, pharmaceutical lobbyists, and media moguls, whose collective wealth could finance small nations. The December evening has transformed the Potomac River into a ribbon of black silk visible through floor-to-ceiling windows that frame the Virginia skyline beyond. Macbeth moves through the crowd like a newly crowned king, accepting tribute from his subjects. His black tuxedo, tailored by the same craftsmen who dress ambassadors and cabinet secretaries, fits him with the precision of armor designed for social warfare. At his throat, a bow tie made from silk imported from France creates the perfect accent for a man whose rise to power has been as swift as it has been ruthless. Campaign contributors approach him with the reverent expressions of pilgrims seeking blessings from a political saint. Eleanor glides beside him in a midnight blue evening gown that transforms her into a vision of senatorial elegance. Her auburn hair is styled in the sophisticated updo that political wives perfect for events where every photograph becomes part of their husband's visual legacy. Diamond earrings, gifts from grateful defense contractors, catch the chandelier light and throw tiny rainbows across her alabaster skin. Her smile never wavers, even as her eyes continuously scan the room for threats and opportunities. The ballroom's opulence represents everything that average Americans imagine when they think about Washington's corridors of power. Gold leaf decorates moldings that frame oil paintings of American presidents, their faces bearing expressions of noble purpose that mock the transactional reality of contemporary politics. Round tables draped in white linen create intimate islands where billion-dollar defense contracts are negotiated between courses of lobster thermidor and aged filet mignon. Senator Patricia Weir approaches their table with the predatory grace of a veteran political operative who has survived 3 decades in Washington's shark-infested waters. Her silver evening gown reflects the ballroom's lighting like liquid mercury, and her jewelry consists of pieces collected during years of attending similar events where appearance serves as currency and status determines survival. Her smile carries the calculated warmth of someone who has learned to project sincerity while concealing lethal intentions. "Michael, darling." She greets him with air kisses that avoid disturbing her perfectly applied makeup. "How wonderful to see you taking Duncan's place with such grace under pressure." The compliment contains layers of meaning that resonate through the ballroom's acoustically perfect atmosphere. Weir's words acknowledge his rapid ascension while simultaneously reminding everyone within earshot that he occupies a position made vacant by scandal and betrayal. Her praise serves as both congratulation and warning, a verbal chess move that advances multiple strategic objectives simultaneously. Banquo sits at a nearby table, his position carefully chosen to maintain visual contact with his former friend, while creating sufficient distance to suggest professional rather than personal relationship. His wife, Martha, a former congressional staffer whose political instincts rival those of elected officials, whispers observations about the evening's power dynamics that flow like intelligence reports from a battlefield reconnaissance mission. The Appropriations Committee assignments are being finalized next week, Weir continues, her voice modulated to carry just far enough to reach the tables where committee chairmen are evaluating potential allies and enemies. "Your expertise in infrastructure development makes you a natural choice for the Transportation Subcommittee." The subcommittee chairmanship represents more than just legislative influence. It controls billions of dollars in federal contracts that can enrich cooperative corporations while destroying businesses that fail to demonstrate proper political loyalty. Highway construction projects, bridge repairs, and mass transit systems become weapons in the arsenal of senatorial power, capable of rewarding supporters and punishing enemies with surgical precision. Across the ballroom, investigative journalists from the Washington Post, New York Times, and CBS News circulate among the guests like antibodies searching for infection in the political bloodstream. Their presence transforms every conversation into a potential source of future headlines, every handshake into evidence of questionable associations. In the post-Watergate era, reporters have become the unofficial police force of American democracy, their investigations serving as judge and jury for politicians whose careers hang in the balance. Of course, Weir adds with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes, committee assignments depend on maintaining the confidence of party leadership. Recent events have made everyone somewhat cautious about potential vulnerabilities. The implicit threat ripples through Macbeth's consciousness, like concentric circles spreading across a pond's surface after a stone breaks its placid reflection. Weir's words confirm what he has suspected since Duncan's fall. His position remains precarious, dependent on the continued silence of those who possess information about his role in the scandal. Political power in Washington exists only as long as potential enemies remain unaware of their ability to destroy it. The orchestra begins playing a waltz that transforms the ballroom into a scene from a bygone era when political corruption was conducted with more elegance and less media scrutiny. Couples take to the dance floor, their movements creating a ballet of ambition and alliance that mirrors the larger choreography of American democracy. Each spin and dip represents shifting power relationships, temporary partnerships, and the eternal dance between public service and private gain. Eleanor's hand tightens on his arm with pressure that communicates volumes about her assessment of their current situation. Her political instincts, honed by years of surviving Washington's social battlefield, have detected the subtle changes in atmospheric pressure that precede political storms. The same network of contacts that provided intelligence about Duncan's vulnerabilities now whispers warnings about investigations that could expose their own carefully hidden secrets. The private dining room adjacent to the Kennedy Center ballroom serves as a sanctuary where Washington's most sensitive conversations unfold away from the cameras and recording devices that have made public spaces into potential evidence chambers. Dark mahogany panels absorb sound and secrets with equal efficiency, while oil paintings of forgotten senators gaze down with expressions that suggest they understand the moral compromises necessary for political survival in America's capital city. Macbeth sits across from Thomas Fleance, Banquo's 28-year-old son, whose idealistic enthusiasm for public service serves as an uncomfortable reminder of the man he used to be before ambition corroded his moral foundation. Fleance possesses his father's analytical intelligence combined with the untested optimism of someone who still believes government can serve noble purposes beyond the accumulation of power and wealth. "Senator," Flance begins, his voice carrying the respectful tone that young staffers learn to employ when addressing their political superiors. My father wanted me to discuss the Transportation Subcommittee hearing scheduled for next month. The manila folder Flance opens contains preliminary witness lists, testimony schedules, and background research on the corporations seeking federal contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Each document represents hours of preparation by congressional staffers whose salaries are paid by taxpayers who assume their representatives work solely in the public interest. The reality, visible in these confidential files, reveals a system where private profit and public policy intertwine like lovers in an intimate embrace. Through the dining room's tall windows, the Potomac River reflects the lights of Virginia like scattered diamonds against black velvet. The December wind rattles the glass with irregular percussion that seems to echo the nervous rhythm of Macbeth's heartbeat. Outside, Washington's monument and memorial lights create a celestial constellation that celebrates American democracy, while inside this exclusive chamber, its representatives conduct business that would horrify the citizens they claim to serve. Your father has always been thorough in his research, Macbeth replies, his fingers drumming against the leather portfolio that contains his own files on potential committee witnesses. His attention to detail has saved us from several embarrassing oversight failures. The compliment carries an undertone of threat that Flance either doesn't recognize or chooses to ignore. Banquo's meticulous record-keeping has indeed prevented numerous scandals, but those same detailed files could serve as evidence if hostile investigators ever gained access to them. In Washington's post-Watergate environment, thoroughness can become liability when forensic accountants and grand juries begin examining the paper trails that connect campaign contributions to legislative favors. He's been reviewing the Morrison Industries application, Flance continues, consulting his handwritten notes with the careful precision he inherited from his father. Their environmental impact assessments show some concerning discrepancies that might warrant additional scrutiny. Morrison Industries represents exactly the kind of defense contractor whose cooperation has become essential to Macbeth's political survival. Their campaign contributions flow through political action committees and charitable foundations like arteries carrying the lifeblood of electoral success. Any public questioning of their business practices could trigger retaliatory investigations that might expose the network of mutual benefits that sustains Washington's power structure. Eleanor enters the dining room with movements that suggest urgent purpose barely contained beneath her polished exterior. Her evening gown rustles with fabric that costs more than most Americans earn in months, but her expression carries the focused intensity of a general receiving battlefield intelligence that could determine victory or defeat. In her hand, she carries a cellular telephone, one of the new devices that allow important people to maintain communication even during social events. Gentlemen, she interrupts with apologetic authority, I'm afraid we need to discuss some developments that require immediate attention. The telephone represents more than just technological advancement. It symbolizes the acceleration of political communication that has made Washington's scandals spread faster and burn hotter than ever before. Information that once took days to circulate now travels at electronic speed, transforming minor controversies into career-ending disasters before targets can organize defensive responses. Flance begins gathering his documents with movements that suggest both professional efficiency and personal unease. His political instincts, still developing but already sharp, detect atmospheric changes that veteran Washington operators recognize as the precursors to major storms. The young man's presence has become inconvenient rather than beneficial, a complication that threatens to expose conversations better conducted in complete privacy. Perhaps we should continue this discussion tomorrow, Macbeth suggests, his tone carrying the subtle dismissal that experienced politicians use to terminate uncomfortable situations without creating obvious offense. Your father and I can review the Morrison materials in detail before making any committee decisions. As Flance exits through the dining room's heavy oak doors, his footsteps echo down the marble corridors, with the irregular rhythm of someone whose political education has just advanced by several degrees. The young man's departure creates a vacuum that fills immediately with the whispered intelligence that Eleanor has been gathering from her network of sources throughout the evening's festivities. 3 different news organizations have been asking questions about Banquo's consulting contracts. She reports, her voice modulated to prevent eavesdropping by the Secret Service agents, whose presence has become ubiquitous since the Duncan scandal. Someone has been providing reporters with detailed financial information that could only come from congressional records. The implications cascade through Macbeth's consciousness like an avalanche, gaining momentum with each revelation. If Banquo has become a source for investigative journalists, then his intimate knowledge of their rise to power could destroy everything they have achieved through betrayal and manipulation. The friend who helped him navigate Washington's treacherous political waters has transformed into the greatest threat to their continued survival. The January blizzard transforms Washington, D.C. into a frozen wasteland, where political ambition and moral corruption lie buried beneath 3 feet of pristine snow that creates the illusion of purity in a city built on compromise and betrayal. The White House stands like an ivory fortress against the gray sky, its windows glowing with warm light that contrasts sharply with the Arctic wind howling through the bare branches of cherry trees that will never bloom again for those who witness their final winter. Macbeth's Senate office has become a command bunker where survival takes precedence over governance. The mahogany desk, once a symbol of democratic authority, now serves as a battlefield map covered with manila folders containing opposition research, financial records, and surveillance photographs that document the movements of potential enemies. Red pins mark the locations of hostile journalists on a wall-mounted map of the District of Columbia, creating a pattern that resembles a military siege. The intercom's electronic buzz cuts through the office's oppressive silence like a scalpel opening infected flesh. His secretary's voice, carefully modulated to avoid betraying the fear that has consumed the entire staff since rumors of federal grand jury investigations began circulating through Washington's corridors of power, announces visitors whose arrival was both anticipated and dreaded. Senator, the political consultants are here for your 4 o'clock appointment. Dr. Margaret Hex enters first, her gray hair now streaked with premature white that suggests the stress of operating in Washington's increasingly dangerous political environment. Her computer analyses, once presented with mathematical certainty, now carry the tentative quality of predictions made in a world where traditional rules no longer apply. Behind her thick glasses, her eyes hold the haunted expression of someone whose prophetic accuracy has made her complicit in the destruction of decent men. Thomas Word follows, his rumpled appearance more pronounced than during their previous encounter 6 months ago. His polling data, collected through telephone surveys and focus groups, reveals a public growing increasingly suspicious of all political figures in the post-Watergate era. The manila folders he carries contain demographic breakdowns that show trust in government institutions declining like a patient's vital signs during terminal illness. Sarah Gray Malkin brings up the rear, her opposition research techniques having evolved from surgical strikes against individual careers to carpet bombing campaigns that leave no reputation intact. Her network of private investigators, former law enforcement officers, and disgruntled government employees now operates like an intelligence agency devoted to political destruction rather than national security. Senator Macbeth. Dr. Hex begins, settling into the leather chair that faces his desk like a defendant facing judgment. Our computer models indicate significant developments in the investigative landscape surrounding your ascension to power. The office's heating system struggles against the January cold, creating irregular clicking sounds that punctuate their conversation like a Geiger counter detecting radioactive contamination. Outside the tall windows, the Washington Monument disappears into the blizzard's white void, its marble surface invisible against the storm that seems to mirror the political tempest engulfing the nation's capital. The FBI task force examining congressional financial records has expanded its scope. Word reports, consulting printouts generated by government computers, whose electronic memory banks contain the digital fingerprints of every political transaction conducted in the past decade. 3 additional agents have been assigned to what they're calling Operation Clean Sweep. The task force represents the Justice Department's response to public outrage over the Duncan scandal and the resulting demands for comprehensive investigation of congressional corruption. Federal agents trained in forensic accounting now examine bank records, real estate transactions, and campaign contributions with the methodical precision of archaeologists excavating the ruins of American democracy. Macbeth rises from behind his desk and moves to the window, where the blizzard creates a white curtain that obscures the city beyond. The snow falls with relentless persistence, each flake carrying the weight of accumulating evidence that threatens to bury his political career beneath an avalanche of revelation and prosecution. His reflection in the glass shows a man whose features have sharpened during months of constant vigilance, his eyes bearing the predatory gleam of a cornered animal preparing for final battle. Furthermore, Graymalkin adds, with the clinical detachment of a coroner describing autopsy findings, our sources within the Washington Post newsroom indicate that Banquo has been meeting regularly with investigative reporters. Phone records show 17 calls between his residence and the newspaper's direct line during the past month. The betrayal cuts through Macbeth's chest like a blade forged from their decades of friendship and mutual ambition. Banquo, who shared cramped apartments during their early careers, who celebrated electoral victories and mourned political defeats together, has transformed into the Judas whose kiss will deliver him to the modern equivalent of crucifixion, federal prosecution, media destruction, and historical infamy. His cooperation with journalists represents an existential threat to your continued tenure, Dr. Hex explains, her computer-generated projections spread across the coffee table like tarot cards predicting inevitable doom. Mathematical analysis indicates a 92% probability of criminal indictment if current investigative trends continue uninterrupted. The three consultants exchange glances that communicate volumes about their assessment of his situation. They have guided politicians through scandals, elections, and career-ending controversies, but the convergence of federal investigation, media scrutiny, and insider betrayal creates a perfect storm that challenges even their expertise in political survival. Thunder rumbles across the frozen Potomac despite the falling snow, an atmospheric anomaly that seems to announce the approach of forces beyond human control or manipulation. The storm-darkened office transforms into a war room where political survival tactics merge with the primitive instincts of cornered predators. Dr. Hex spreads computer printouts across the mahogany surface like ancient runes, predicting the future through mathematical divination. The electronic calculations, processed through IBM mainframes in underground government facilities, reveal patterns of power and vulnerability that traditional political analysis cannot detect. However, she continues, her voice carrying the measured authority of someone whose predictions have toppled senators and elevated unknowns to positions of extraordinary influence, our demographic modeling suggests three specific scenarios where your position becomes unassailable. The printouts contain bar graphs, statistical analyses, and probability matrices that reduce human ambition to numerical equations. Each chart represents thousands of telephone interviews, focus group sessions, and polling samples that penetrate the American psyche with surgical precision. The data reveals the fears, hopes, and prejudices that determine electoral outcomes in a democracy where information has become the ultimate weapon. First scenario, Word explains, pointing to a graph showing voter preference trends across key demographic segments. No politician whose approval rating exceeds 65% among registered Democrats has ever been successfully prosecuted for financial impropriety. Public support creates institutional immunity. The logic resonates through Macbeth's consciousness like a mathematical proof demonstrating his potential invulnerability. If public opinion can be manipulated through carefully crafted media campaigns, strategic information leaks, and the systematic destruction of hostile sources, then federal prosecutors become irrelevant, regardless of the evidence they accumulate through their investigations. Graymalkin opens a leather portfolio containing surveillance photographs that her network has collected during weeks of systematic intelligence gathering. The black and white images show federal agents entering apartment buildings, journalists meeting with sources in underground parking garages, and congressional staffers carrying manila folders between government offices like couriers delivering messages in a war zone. Second scenario, she states with clinical precision, historical analysis indicates that prosecutors require living witnesses to achieve conviction in political corruption cases. Documentary evidence alone proves insufficient when key testimony comes from individuals whose credibility can be systematically destroyed. The photographs spread across the desk reveal the human faces behind the investigation that threatens his survival. FBI agents whose children attend private schools funded by government salaries, journalists whose mortgage payments depend on newspaper circulation, and congressional staffers whose career's advancement requires the continued favor of their political superiors. Each person in the images possesses vulnerabilities that can be exploited through the application of sufficient pressure and strategic intelligence. Third scenario, Dr. Hex concludes, her computer analysis reaching its final prediction with the inevitability of mathematical truth. No senator who chairs a major committee during wartime has ever been successfully removed from office through criminal prosecution. National security concerns override judicial proceedings. The blizzard intensifies beyond the office windows, creating a white void that seems to swallow the city's monuments and institutions, like a hungry mouth devouring the symbols of American democracy. The storm's violence mirrors the political tempest that has consumed Washington since the Watergate revelations began, the systematic destruction of public trust in governmental institutions. Macbeth returns to his desk, where the three consultants have arranged their materials like generals presenting battle plans to a supreme commander. Their collective expertise, accumulated through decades of political warfare, offers him multiple pathways to survival if he possesses the ruthlessness necessary to implement their strategic recommendations. The moral boundaries that once limited his actions have been eroded by months of compromise and betrayal. The Defense Appropriations Subcommittee chairmanship becomes available next month. He muses, his voice carrying the calculating tone of someone whose humanitarian instincts have been replaced by survival imperatives. Senator Williams announced his retirement yesterday. The subcommittee controls billions of dollars in military spending, making its chairman essential to defense contractors whose profits depend on congressional cooperation. During periods of international tension, when American military forces operate in hostile environments around the globe, senators who oversee defense budgets become untouchable figures whose prosecution could be portrayed as unpatriotic sabotage of national security. Furthermore, Word adds, consulting polling data that measures public opinion regarding various potential military conflicts, our international intelligence suggests significant developments in Southeast Asian political situations that could require increased American involvement. The reference to Vietnam, where American military advisors continue operating despite official withdrawal, creates possibilities for renewed conflict that would transform defense spending from optional political priority to essential national imperative. Politicians who control military appropriations during wartime enjoy protection that extends beyond normal legal constraints. Eleanor enters the office carrying a silver tray with coffee service, her movements suggesting the graceful efficiency of someone whose political instincts have been sharpened by months of constant vigilance. Her presence transforms the sterile atmosphere of strategic planning into something more intimate and dangerous, as if the office has become a family bunker where survival depends on absolute loyalty and mutual protection. The Justice Department task force has scheduled additional interviews, she reports, settling into the chair beside his desk, like a co-conspirator rather than merely a supportive spouse. Banquo received a subpoena this morning requiring him to provide testimony under oath regarding his knowledge of senatorial financial arrangements. The subpoena represents a legal noose tightening around Banquo's neck, forcing him to choose between perjury charges and cooperation with prosecutors whose investigation could destroy his oldest friendship. Federal grand juries operate with prosecutorial powers that can compel testimony, grant immunity, and transform reluctant witnesses into involuntary accomplices in the destruction of political careers. The three consultants exchange meaningful glances that communicate their assessment of the situation's urgency. Their continued employment depends on their client's political survival, making them partners in whatever actions might be necessary to eliminate the threats that surround him like wolves circling wounded prey. The grandfather clock in the corner strikes 6 times, its brass pendulum cutting through the office's tense atmosphere like a metronome measuring the countdown to political annihilation. The January darkness has transformed the windows into black mirrors that reflect the conspirators' faces with the distorted clarity of funhouse glass, making them appear like specters plotting in some netherworld between democracy and dictatorship. Graymalkin produces a manila envelope sealed with red wax, the kind of security measure typically reserved for classified government documents or intelligence communications between hostile nations. Her fingers break the seal with ceremonial precision, revealing photographs that capture moments of vulnerability in the lives of potential obstacles to Macbeth's continued survival. These images were taken by our surveillance team during the past 72 hours, she explains. spreading the black and white photographs across the desk, like evidence in a murder trial. Subject patterns indicate predictable behavioral routines that create opportunities for intervention. The photographs show Banquo's daily routine with documentary precision: morning jogs through Rock Creek Park, lunch meetings at the Capitol Hill Club, evening drives along the Potomac Parkway toward his Georgetown residence. Each image captures him alone or with minimal security, his movements following patterns that any competent operative could exploit for purposes that extend far beyond mere surveillance. Dr. Hex adjusts her glasses, the thick lenses reflecting the desk lamp's light like the eyes of some calculating machine designed to reduce human lives to statistical probabilities. Her computer analysis has evolved beyond electoral prediction into something more sinister: the mathematical calculation of optimal timing for the elimination of political threats. Historical precedent suggests that individuals who provide testimony in high-profile congressional investigations face significantly elevated risks, she states with the clinical detachment of a coroner describing autopsy findings. Automobile accidents, home invasions, and apparent suicides occur at rates 17% above normal during periods of intense federal scrutiny. The statistics hang in the air like poison gas, slowly filling a sealed chamber. Washington's political graveyards are littered with the corpses of whistleblowers, former staffers, and investigative sources whose inconvenient knowledge made them liabilities to powerful interests. The nation's capital operates according to rules that would horrify citizens who still believe in justice and accountability. Macbeth studies the surveillance photographs with the focused intensity of a predator, selecting targets from a herd of potential prey. Banquo's face, captured in telephoto clarity, shows the strain of a man carrying secrets that could destroy lifelong friendships while fulfilling moral obligations to democratic institutions. His wire-rimmed glasses and graying temples give him the appearance of academic wisdom, but his eyes hold the haunted expression of someone who has glimpsed the abyss that lies beneath American politics. Furthermore, Weird continues, consulting polling data that measures public reaction to various types of political violence. Focus group research indicates that voters demonstrate remarkable tolerance for casualties that occur during periods of national crisis. Vietnam statistics show 68% approval for necessary sacrifices made in defense of democratic institutions. The reference to Vietnam creates psychological cover for actions that would be considered unthinkable during peacetime. If American boys can die in Southeast Asian jungles to protect abstract concepts of freedom and democracy, then domestic casualties sustained during the defense of political stability seem almost patriotic by comparison. Eleanor moves to the window, where her reflection joins the ghostly assembly of conspirators planning the destruction of American innocence. Her evening dress, changed from the gala gown into something more appropriate for clandestine meetings, transforms her into a figure from a film noir thriller, where femme fatales manipulate weak men into committing crimes that damn their souls. The subpoena requires Banquo to appear before the grand jury next Friday, she reports, her voice carrying the information like a death sentence read in open court. Federal marshals will provide transportation from his residence to the courthouse, following security protocols designed to protect government witnesses. The security arrangements create both obstacles and opportunities for anyone seeking to prevent Banquo's testimony from reaching federal prosecutors. Government protection details follow predictable patterns based on threat assessment protocols, budget limitations, and personnel availability. Their procedures, designed to defend against foreign terrorists and organized crime figures, may prove inadequate against threats originating from within the system they serve. Graymalkin produces a second envelope, this one containing detailed architectural plans of federal buildings, security checkpoint locations, and traffic patterns around the courthouse where grand jury proceedings occur. The blueprints represent months of intelligence gathering by operatives whose loyalty can be purchased through the same campaign contribution networks that finance electoral campaigns. Our technical analysis suggests multiple intervention scenarios, she explains, pointing to specific locations marked with red ink on the architectural drawings. Underground parking facilities, elevator systems, and stairwell configurations create environments where accidents occur with statistical regularity. The plans transform the federal courthouse from a temple of justice into a potential killing ground where American democracy's enemies can eliminate threats to their continued domination. The building's marble corridors, designed to inspire confidence in governmental institutions, become hunting grounds, where predators wearing expensive suits stalk prey whose only crime was believing in constitutional principles. The blizzard continues its assault against the office windows, each gust of wind seeming to whisper the names of politicians whose careers have been destroyed by their association with corruption scandals. The storm's violence provides acoustic cover for conversations that would shock the American public if they understood the casual brutality with which their representatives discuss the elimination of inconvenient witnesses. The February dawn breaks gray and merciless over the Potomac River, its weak light struggling to penetrate the smog that hangs over Washington, D.C., like the ghosts of murdered democracies. The cherry blossoms that once symbolized renewal and hope lie frozen in their buds, victims of an unseasonably harsh winter that seems to mirror the moral climate that has settled over the nation's capital like a permanent curse. Eleanor Macbeth paces the marble floors of their Georgetown townhouse with the restless energy of a caged predator whose hunting territory has been invaded by more dangerous species. Her silk nightgown, once a symbol of domestic luxury, now hangs on her diminished frame like a shroud. The weight she has lost during months of constant vigilance has sharpened her features into something almost skeletal, as if the corruption eating away at her soul has begun consuming her physical form as well. The morning newspapers spread across the mahogany coffee table tell the story of a political system in terminal collapse. Headlines scream accusations and revelations in bold type that seems to bleed ink across pages devoted to chronicling the systematic destruction of American faith in governmental institutions. Senate corruption probe expands. 3 more congressmen under investigation, and FBI seeks additional witnesses, create a mosaic of democratic disintegration. Her hands shake as she pours coffee from the sterling silver service that once graced diplomatic receptions and state dinners. The tremor in her fingers reflects the seismic instability that has transformed their carefully constructed political empire into a house of cards awaiting the slightest breeze to send it tumbling into ruins. The china cups rattle against their saucers like bones in a gravedigger's cart. Through the tall windows that face the Potomac, she can see the Washington Monument standing like an accusatory finger pointing toward heaven, its marble surface stained by acid rain that mirrors the moral pollution corroding the city's foundations. Federal helicopters patrol the gray sky with the persistence of mechanical vultures, their surveillance equipment capable of penetrating the walls of private residences where political conspiracies are planned and democratic principles are murdered. The telephone's electronic ring cuts through the morning silence with the urgency of an air raid siren announcing imminent attack. Her hand hovers over the receiver for several seconds, as if the simple act of answering might trigger the final cascade of revelations that will destroy everything they have built through betrayal and manipulation. When she finally lifts the phone to her ear, her voice carries the brittle quality of glass about to shatter under pressure. Macbeth residence. The caller is Dr. Margaret Hex, whose computer predictions have achieved the accuracy of ancient oracles, whose prophecies invariably foretold doom for those who sought to defy the natural order of justice and retribution. Her voice carries the mechanical precision of someone whose humanity has been replaced by statistical algorithms and probability matrices. Mrs. Macbeth, our morning analysis indicates significant developments in the investigative timeline. The grand jury proceedings have accelerated beyond our projected parameters. The words strike Eleanor's consciousness like physical blows, each syllable carrying the weight of accumulated evidence that federal prosecutors have been gathering, with the methodical patience of archaeologists excavating the ruins of collapsed civilizations. The investigation has evolved from fishing expedition to surgical strike, with her husband positioned as the primary target for prosecution. Furthermore, Dr. Hex continues, her report delivered with the clinical detachment of a coroner describing autopsy findings. Intercepted communications suggest that multiple witnesses have agreed to provide testimony in exchange for immunity agreements. The prosecution's case appears to be approaching critical mass. Eleanor's reflection in the living room mirror shows a woman whose beauty has been consumed by months of constant fear and sleepless nights spent planning the destruction of potential threats. Her auburn hair, once styled with meticulous care for television appearances and magazine photographs, hangs in disheveled strands that frame a face bearing the haunted expression of someone who has stared too long into the abyss of political corruption. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimes 7 times. its brass pendulum measuring the passage of moments that bring them closer to the inevitable reckoning that awaits all who seek to build power on foundations of betrayal and murder. The sound echoes through rooms decorated with the artifacts of American political history, framed copies of the Constitution, oil paintings of founding fathers, and photographs with presidents whose moral authority now seems to mock their current occupants. The senator's security detail has reported unusual surveillance activity around both the Capitol and your residence, Dr. Hex adds, her computer analysis having detected patterns of federal investigation that suggest imminent action. Our intelligence sources indicate that arrest warrants may be issued within 72 hours. The revelation strikes Eleanor's chest like a blade forged from the accumulated weight of their crimes against democracy and friendship. The federal marshals who will come for her husband will carry more than just legal authority. They will represent the resurrection of American justice from the grave, where it was buried by politicians who believed themselves above the law that governs ordinary citizens. Coffee stains spread across the morning newspapers as her trembling hands lose control of the delicate china cup, the brown liquid seeping into headlines that chronicle the approaching end of their political dynasty. The stain expands like blood from a mortal wound, obscuring the text but not the implications of the stories that document their inevitable destruction. The Hart Senate office building thrums with the electric tension of a political system consuming itself like a serpent devouring its own tail. Federal agents in dark suits move through the marble corridors with the methodical efficiency of forensic investigators processing a massive crime scene, their briefcases containing subpoenas and search warrants that will strip away the final facades, protecting Washington's corruption from public scrutiny. Macbeth's Senate office has been transformed into a fortress under siege, its mahogany furniture rearranged to create defensive positions where staff members huddle over shredding machines that consume documents with the hungry efficiency of paper piranhas. The mechanical whirring of destruction mingles with the urgent whispers of political operatives trying to eliminate evidence before federal prosecutors can transform their private communications into public testimony. His desk, once a symbol of senatorial authority, now serves as command center for a desperate rearguard action against the forces of democratic accountability that have finally awakened from their post-Watergate hibernation. Manila folders containing bank records, real estate transactions, and campaign contribution reports disappear into industrial shredders, whose steel teeth reduce years of careful financial architecture to confetti that will never reconstruct into comprehensible evidence. The intercom's electronic buzz cuts through the destruction with news that federal marshals have entered the building, their warrant-bearing authority creating panic among staffers whose careers depend on the continued survival of politicians whose power was built on systematic betrayal of public trust. Security cameras positioned throughout the corridors track their progress like electronic eyes recording the final movements of a dying political organism. Young Thomas Fleance appears in the doorway, with the wild-eyed expression of someone whose political education has accelerated beyond human comprehension in the span of a single morning. His shirt is disheveled, his tie askew, and his normally careful grooming abandoned in favor of the survival instincts that Washington's political environment breeds in even its most idealistic inhabitants. "Senator," he gasps, his voice carrying the breathless urgency of a messenger, delivering news from a battlefield where friends have become enemies and allies have transformed into prosecutors. "My father. They found him in Rock Creek Park this morning." The words hang in the office air like poison gas, slowly spreading through a sealed chamber. Banquo, whose friendship stretched back through decades of shared ambition and mutual loyalty, has been discovered beneath the February ice that covers the stream where Washington's political elite once conducted their most sensitive negotiations away from electronic surveillance and journalistic scrutiny. "Apparent heart attack," Fleance continues, his analytical mind struggling to process information that challenges everything he believed about his father's physical condition and political circumstances. The paramedic said it looked like he collapsed during his morning jog. The timing strikes Macbeth's consciousness with the force of divine retribution finally arriving to collect payment for crimes committed against friendship and democratic principles. Banquo's death, occurring less than 48 hours before his scheduled grand jury testimony, creates a vacuum where the prosecution's most damaging evidence was supposed to originate. The coincidence would be remarkable if it weren't so obviously orchestrated. Eleanor enters the office through the private door that connects to the adjacent conference room, where she has been coordinating with their legal defense team, a collection of criminal attorneys whose expertise in political corruption cases makes them invaluable allies during the final stages of governmental prosecution. Her face bears the pale complexion of someone whose sleep has been replaced by pharmaceutical assistance and whose meals consist primarily of anxiety medication. "The Justice Department has issued a statement," she reports, her voice carrying the hollow quality of someone whose emotional reserves have been exhausted by months of constant crisis management. They're treating Banquo's death as part of the ongoing investigation into congressional corruption. The federal investigation has evolved beyond simple financial crime into something more complex and dangerous. A systematic examination of the methods through which American democracy has been subverted by politicians whose hunger for power exceeded their commitment to constitutional principles. Banquo's death, rather than eliminating evidence, has become additional evidence of the lengths to which corrupt officials will go to protect their positions. Through the tall windows that offer panoramic views of the Capitol dome, television news trucks create a mechanical siege line whose satellite dishes reach skyward like electronic prayers for more scandals to feed the public's insatiable appetite for political destruction. Reporters with microphones patrol the sidewalks like wolves hunting for wounded prey whose blood can be transformed into ratings and career advancement. Fleance approaches the desk, where classified documents continue disappearing into shredding machines whose mechanical digestion cannot eliminate the digital copies that federal computer specialists have already secured through their systematic penetration of congressional data systems. His young face bears the expression of someone whose faith in American institutions has been shattered like crystal against concrete. "Senator, there's something else," he whispers, his voice dropping to the conspiratorial tone that has become the default communication method for everyone associated with the unfolding scandal. "My father left me a letter, sealed with instructions to deliver it only if something happened to him." The envelope he produces carries the weight of final testimony from beyond the grave, its contents potentially more damaging than any grand jury appearance could have been. Banquo's handwriting on the address label creates a direct connection between the living and the dead, transforming his friend's final communication into a weapon that could complete the prosecution's case against Democratic corruption. FBI agents appear in the hallway outside, their presence creating visible panic among congressional staffers who suddenly remember urgent appointments that require their immediate departure from the building. The sealed envelope trembles in Fleance's hands like a leaf caught in the winds of political hurricane, its contents representing the final testimony of a man whose friendship was repaid with orchestrated murder. The wax seal bears Banquo's personal signet, a small detail that transforms the document from simple correspondence into something approaching sacred testimony from beyond the grave. Macbeth's fingers break the red wax, with movements that feel disconnected from his conscious will, as if some external force is compelling him to confront the evidence of his own moral destruction. The letter unfolds to reveal Banquo's careful handwriting, each word crafted with the precision of someone who understood that his final communication might serve as his political epitaph. "My dear friend Michael," the letter begins, its opening words creating an immediate contrast between past affection and present betrayal that strikes his consciousness like acid poured on exposed nerve endings. "If you are reading this, then my suspicions about the dangerous path you have chosen have proven tragically accurate." The federal agents advance through the corridors with the inexorable precision of natural forces, reclaiming territory that was temporarily conquered by human ambition. Their footsteps create a rhythmic percussion that mingles with the mechanical whirring of document shredders, working overtime to destroy evidence that has already been preserved in duplicate copies stored in federal facilities beyond congressional reach. "I have documented everything," Banquo's letter continues, each revelation building toward a crescendo of accumulated evidence that will destroy not only Macbeth's career, but the entire network of corruption that has metastasized through Washington's political bloodstream. The financial transactions, the real estate manipulations, the campaign contribution laundering, and most importantly, the systematic destruction of Duncan's reputation through fabricated evidence. Eleanor collapses into the leather chair beside his desk, her elegant composure finally shattered by the weight of consequences that have been building like pressure in a sealed container approaching explosive failure. Her hands cover her face as if she can hide from the federal prosecutors whose investigation has penetrated every aspect of their carefully constructed political empire. The silk of her blouse bears dark stains that might be coffee or tears or the metaphorical blood of their victims. Furthermore, the letter reveals with documentary precision, "I have provided copies of all relevant materials to 3 separate federal agencies, 5 different news organizations, and a private attorney whose instructions are to release everything in the event of my death or disappearance." The dead man's foresight creates a web of evidence distribution that makes suppression impossible through normal channels of political influence. Banquo's final strategy transforms his murder from solution into catalyst, ensuring that his death triggers the complete exposure of the corruption network that his friendship helped create and his conscience ultimately rejected. FBI agents appear in the doorway with the quiet authority of professionals whose careers are built on dismantling criminal organizations that believe themselves above legal accountability. Their dark suits and electronic equipment mark them as representatives of a justice system that has awakened from its post-Watergate coma to discover democracy being murdered in its sleep. Senator Macbeth, the lead agent announces, producing a document whose official seals and legal language represent the resurrection of American law enforcement from the grave, where it was buried by politicians who confused public service with private enrichment. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and accessory to murder." The handcuffs click around his wrists with the finality of history passing judgment on a man whose hunger for power consumed everything decent in his character. The metal feels cold against his skin, but not as cold as the realization that his ascension to political prominence was merely the first act in a tragedy that concludes with federal prosecution and historical infamy. Through the tall windows, the Washington Monument stands like a marble accusation pointing toward gray February skies that seem permanently overcast since the moral pollution began consuming the city's atmosphere. Television cameras record his arrest with the mechanical efficiency of electronic vultures feeding on the carrion of collapsed political careers. Eleanor's voice rises in a keening wail that echoes through the office corridors, like the cry of some wounded animal whose habitat has been destroyed by forces beyond its comprehension. Her carefully maintained facade of political sophistication crumbles into something primal and broken, revealing the human cost of ambitions that demanded the sacrifice of friendship, loyalty, and basic decency. The grandfather clock in the corner strikes 12 noon as federal marshals escort their prisoner through marble hallways, where portraits of previous senators gaze down with expressions that seem to judge the current generation's failure to uphold the democratic principles that built American institutions from the wilderness of competing colonial interests. Young Flance watches the procession with the hollow expression of someone whose political education has concluded with the revelation that power corrupts absolutely, and that the price of corruption is ultimately paid by everyone who participates in or witnesses the systematic destruction of governmental integrity. The February sun breaks through the gray clouds for the first time in weeks, its light streaming through the Hart Building's windows like divine illumination, finally penetrating the darkness that has consumed Washington's corridors of power. The brightness seems to promise renewal, but for those whose careers were built on betrayal and murder, the light offers only exposure and the terrible clarity of judgment finally rendered. Outside, the cherry blossoms remain frozen in their buds, waiting for a spring that may never come for those who chose ambition over honor in the nation's capital.